it's great because you're starting to talk about the types of practices that might start drawing out some of this stuff, and it's a lovely link into the next poll that we'll put up, just around the types of practices that you generally use with your players when practicing receiving skills. So again, if you can take a couple of seconds just to fill that in, and we'll pick up the responses. And like I say, you're starting to talk about types of practices that'll expose the players to different situations, scenarios, that'll encourage them to do certain things, whether it be scan or other stuff. What are the best practices to encourage and enhance players' receiving skills?
I'm going to tell you what a kid said to me, and it changed. He's a kid, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "If there weren't any defenders, I wouldn't pass it." Yeah, why would I pass it? He said, "I'd just run straight at that goalie and put it in the goal." And that made me think, all right. So my view is that you've got to have some interference or something to block you or change what you do. That's why I think semi-opposed and opposed practices are absolutely vital in getting receiving skills. Yeah, they've got to be part and parcel of what you're doing. There is no way that you can practice unopposed receiving skills and then expect to deal with it when it gets random and you don't really know what the defender's doing or things change. So I think it's getting the balance, Robbie. There's nothing wrong with unopposed practices, yeah, if you know what the outcomes are and you know why you're doing them. If you think that doing unopposed practices on receiving skills is going to help you on your scanning, then it might do to a very short degree, but you're going to need some foxes in the sheep pen for you to sort of put that in action, if you see what I mean.
No, you mentioned there might be a time and a place to do unopposed practice around receiving skills. So when would that be, and what might it be the benefits for the players to do them in small portions and at certain points?
Well, sometimes you might want to. The thing about unopposed practices is you're not going to have the ball taken off you, so you can pretty much inwardly focus on yourself, not worry about anyone else. Just get this bit right, yeah. So, in other words, if you want to, Cara was talking about particular skills, like a ball comes to you and you want to take it, you want a particular touch. In other words, you what they say, take it on your back foot, if there's ever such a thing, yeah. Then they need to see what that looks like. What does that look like if they don't know? But the issue with unopposed practices is that you can get some fantastic work out of 2v2s and 3v3s and 4v4s and 3v2s. My question is, do you really need to do unopposed practices? You've got them for an hour, yeah? Why? What do you need to do that for? Is there you got to know the outcomes of or what you're giving up, yeah? And as I say, if you've got defenders and interference, then you will easily be able to practice. Even a 2v1 practices for me are better than unopposed practices on receiving skills. Not 1v1 because you haven't got anyone to give it to. 2v1, 2v2s, 3v2s. You can do it all day long. 4v2s if you want.
Just to back up Noddy, I think if you're gonna do unopposed practices, really be clear about what you're getting and what you're not getting.
Yeah.
And be clear about what's present there for what's available for the players to figure out. And if the more you take away, they're not going to get better at that bit. So if you want them to get better at decisions, and you take away all the decisions, and they're not going to get better at decisions. You might do some unopposed, and they might improve some of the biomechanics. But like I said about the coordination, really the thing in football is that coordination of yourself with the ball, the connection is how you pit that against opponents in the moving pictures of football. So that's one of the things you need to guard against. One of the things I tend to do is try to keep some interference. So if you're going to do something like if there's three, so I'll play to you, Robbie, you play to Noddy, it's unopposed. Instead of having maybe three set up side by side, have it in the same area so they're going across each other. So at least you've got to check, and there's moving parts, there's moving bodies. You know what I mean? That's what I mean by interference. There's stuff in the way, there's moving parts on the sides. That they're not static, that they've got a role to play. So you've got to find, you've got to search. At least there's some moving parts. If you know where the ball's going to come from every time, what you need to do and where you're going to put the ball to. You don't even need to look. And there's a big chunk of receiving reading that you're not really practicing. So if you're really clear about what you're getting, I'd say that's okay. I'm also a noddy around then small-sided, small number formats, smaller numbers get you more repetition in these types of skills and more opportunities to practice them. So that's really, even as the kids get older, there's still some real value in 2v2, 3v3, 4v4. And I think one of the decisions with the younger kids is when they will go from the 1v1 and when they're ready to start thinking about they can play with a mate. So we're going to play a bit more of 2v2s so they can use the mate if they need it.
You can make unopposed practices really interesting with multi-ball, lots of movement. If you did a square 10 by 10 by 10, yeah, which you see quite often, and people pass it around the square, then you're passing 10 yards 4 times. Yes. Well, in a game, you might pass 1 yard, you might 10 yards, you might pass 15 yards. The point is you've got to bring variety and repetition and frequency to unopposed practices and movement. So, you know, you can imagine that I've seen people do some fantastic unopposed practices for short periods, but they're very skilled at 3 balls going at one time. So 1 minute you've got, next minute another ball's on its way, so you've got another go. There's different outcomes. You know, there's like sometimes you dribble, sometimes you pass it. The passes are all different distances. You've got to be very skilled to make unopposed practices be opposed practices for me. You know, if you were to put them in a third, say, well, that doesn't trump that. Yeah. If you can trump it by repeating very similar things, then you know exactly what you're getting, and all credit to you. But it's a hard task.
I would tend to recommend more game-based, practices where possible, unless you've got a real specific need, and also for a specific player that's different to the group. So you can get into all that, but lots of game-based practices, which this will occur naturally. Space is important, so you might and numbers. So pay attention to the numbers. Smaller numbers will probably increase repetition. It also reduces a lot of the noise. So they can be really good to hone in on particular skills.
And directional as well, Robbie. You know, directional practices with an objective. Even if you had a 3v3, get the ball over this end line. Yeah, at least I know that that's my end line and that's their end line. And the objective is to get the ball over that end line, and that's left, that's right, that's forward, and that's back. You've got to have this football compass in order for receiving skills to make sense. You know, sometimes we do, they've got validity, but sometimes you do practices in circles and stuff like that. Well, which way's forward? It's only the way you're facing. So it's almost like really conditioning yourself as often as you can to do opposed practices with a clear objective. And then you can really work on the tactics of that's forward, that's left, that's right. And then some of the language becomes more meaningful.
And I think within that, the important thing is to help them explore what ways totally. There's like a whole world of receiving you can explore within those little situations. You can change the size of the pitch, you make it long and narrow, so there's more space to find in behind maybe the back line. Like playing offsides in a small-sided game might be important to keep some realism to the time of the runs and all those types. So good game.
More objective-driven, Cara, than topic-driven. You know, the objective is to get the ball over that end line. How are we going to do it? Well, it could be a wall pass. It could be you taking it out your feet and dribbling past, so on and so forth. You know, I think sometimes we lose sight of the objectives of the games. I think just a couple of bits. Not just the chuck in is one's around like the other thing within it. You might use like a constraint or a condition to bring stuff out. Totally. One that I've used, I'll chuck out there, which and there's loads. We're going to send more through ideas. One is like trying to take your first touch forward or play forward with your first touch. The problem with that is it can be a bit restrictive. But the idea behind that game is that if you've got to try and take your first touch forward, there's 2 ways to really be successful. Within that, you can either have to prepare to give yourself the chance to be able to go forward with your first touch, or play forward with your first touch, or if you're getting not in an ideal position and you've got to find a skillful way. But that needs to be accompanied with the right conditions and the environment that kids can experiment and explore. Well, again, there's some trade-offs to that. Sometimes it's not the right decision to do that.
So sometimes using words like try to instead of must are important. But you want to just play. That's just one example. There's other examples, and I think just being careful with those constraints as well, so it doesn't sort of spoil the game. The other thing I just want to say about receiving, I think it's a challenge for coaches, is asking you to take your focus away from the player on the ball, and you've got to predict play to observe. So you need to be watching before the ball comes to the player if you can, so you can observe what the player's doing before. Now, I'm not saying to go and coach at the top, but for your observation skill of search, you've got to almost be ahead of the ball so you can see what the player does before the ball arrives. So that's a skill as coaches. We need to keep developing our observation skill, not just about the player on the ball, but if we want to help players before, in the before bit, we need to be observing them before the ball arrives so we can help. And that's a skill in itself. So we need to keep developing this knowledge and skills and observation skills to then decide, well, how best to help the players.
I do think, Robbie, I'm going to say it again, directional practices with a clear objective. You keep repeating that objective. I watched a practice the other day, and there are two target players, and I hope everyone knows you get the ball from one end to the other. And not often enough did the players, when they're working towards the end, look at the target player to see if he was free. It was boys playing, because they forgot the objective. So what they did is kept passing it, but forgot that the objective was to get the ball to the target player. So they could have got it to the target player, could have received, orientated their body towards the target, which is the target player. So the coach was applauding the passes, saying, great pass, great pass. But my point was they've forgotten the objective. They're passing it all day long. But that bloke up there he's been standing there for 5 minutes, and he's just standing there. He doesn't have to move because he's not getting the ball. So I think the thing is, Robbie, about really having a clear objective and reminding the players that is the objective. Come on, that's the objective. Get it to the target player. And then directional. And I think you wouldn't go far wrong with that. Opposed, directional, clear objectives for practices. You've got a chance, I think.
And I think symbols often better. So like even silent football can be good. Although it sounds really simple, it can be good for receiving because you've got to scan, you've got to check, you can't rely on other people. And I think aerial control was mentioned. Even like if you're playing a 3v3, to get the ball back in the game instead of dribbling or passing from the floor, could be take throw-ins. So that you have to practice aerial control, or it might be like little side volleys back into the pitch. Simple little things like that. So the games that you often maybe do can just shift the focus.